you as a customer or a client will be placing an order to the waiter. Many of the apps and websites who interact on a daily basis would not function nearly as smoothly without REST API working behind the scenes. So there are four key methods that REST APIs use to handle data. These are get, post, put. Now, if you want to delete my post, right, that is not possible, right? Hey everyone, welcome to Preparing YouTube channel, where we make learning backend engineering fun, accessible, and practical. I am Sahib Kumar, and I am excited to have you here today. If you are new to PrepTrain, this is the place where we dive into essential tech concepts with easy to understand explanations, real world example, and hands-on tutorial. Whether you are a college student, a fresher, or someone who is just getting started in backend development, you are in the right place to level up your skills. Now, today's video is all about REST APIs, an absolute must to know for anyone working in web development or backend engineering. We will be breaking down the core methods that make REST APIs work: get, post, put, delete. These four methods are the backbone of how apps like Instagram, Netflix, and even your favorite e-commerce sites communicate with server to retrieve, send, update, and remove data. Why is this important to you? Well, if you have ever wondered how your Instagram feed refreshes, or how you upload new photos, or even how websites update your information, it's all thanks to REST APIs. Mastering these basics will give you a strong foundation to build more powerful, scalable backend systems. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out any of our future videos. We have got plenty of valuable content lined up to help you grow as a backend engineer. Alright, let me bring my deck and then we will continue diving deeper into REST APIs basic. So let's start by laying the foundation for today's topic, REST API. Now, you have probably heard the term REST APIs being thrown around, especially if you have worked in web development or backend programming. But what exactly is it, and why is it so important? First, REST stands for Representational State Transfer. It sounds technical, but it's really just a set of rules that allow different systems to communicate with each other. Imagine two people who don't speak the same language. They need some kind of translator to help them communicate. Well, that's what a REST API does. It acts as a universal language that different systems like your phone and a web server use to exchange data. The main goal of REST API is to make this communication simple, scalable, and efficient. Whether you are scrolling through Instagram, checking the weather, uploading a file, a REST API is working behind the scenes to fetch, send, or modify data between your app, like basically the client and a server. So here in this example, you will see a diagram basically which illustrate that the client, which in case could be your phone or a web browser, sends a request to the server, and the server processes this request and sends the response back to the client with the data, right? So this exchange essentially of how REST APIs work. It is an efficient way of ensuring that the right data gets to the right place. Now that we have covered the basics of what a REST API is, let's simplify things even further with a real world example that will help you make this concept crystal clear. Alright, so to make things even simpler, let's use a real world example that everyone can relate to: a restaurant. Imagine you are at a restaurant and you are hungry. You call over the waiter, place your order. The waiter then takes your order to the kitchen. So you as a customer or a client will be placing an order to the waiter, and the waiter will then take your order, and the waiter will take it to the kitchen, where the kitchen might be having multiple chefs who might be expert in multiple cuisines. You know, someone might be expert in Indian, someone might be in Italian, or someone might be in, let's say, French things or cuisines. So based on what your order is, they will assign it to a chef that, hey, this order just came up, now you need to do this, right? Now in the world of REST API, you are the client, okay, the person who is making a request, and the waiter is the REST API who is taking this request and taking it to the server. Server is the kitchen. Now the kitchen is the server, and the chef might be, let's say, database or services where all the raw data or ingredients is stored. And just like in a restaurant, when the waiter does not actually cook your food, it makes sure that it is delivered correctly, right? So after a while, the waiter brings your food back to your table so that you can enjoy your meal. Now the REST API does not create the data but facilitates its transfer between you and the server. Now that we have made things a bit easier to understand, let's dive into the four core methods that REST API use to communicate with the server. Let's take a look at some real world use cases where REST APIs are applied. REST APIs are incredibly versatile and are used in a wide variety of industries from social media to e-commerce and even streaming services. In fact, many of the apps and websites you interact on a daily basis would not function nearly as smoothly without REST API working behind the scene. Let's start with social media platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Every time you refresh your feed, you are making a GET request to fetch the latest post. When you upload a new photo or let's say a tweet, that is a post request. When you edit your profile, it's put request. And when you delete an old post, you are making a delete request. All of these interactions are powered by REST APIs, which allows app to communicate with the server and handle these requests seamlessly. Without REST API, things like uploading images or fetching new posts would be much more challenging. Next up is e-commerce. Platforms like Amazon, Shopify, eBay rely heavily on REST APIs to manage their massive amounts of data. When you add an item to your cart, a post request is sent to the server to store the item. If you update your shipping address, a put request is made to modify that information. When you decide to remove an item from your cart, you are sending a delete request to remove it from the server's database. REST APIs are ensuring that all of these data exchanges happen quickly and reliably, allowing you to shop online without any hiccups. Let's take one more example, streaming services like Netflix and Spotify. These platforms use REST APIs to deliver content to users. For example, when you search for a movie or a song, a GET request is made to fetch the relevant data from the server. And if you add something to your watch list or create a new playlist, a POST request is sent to the data. REST APIs make it possible for these services to handle millions of users and deliver content in real time. There are numerous use cases of REST APIs, some of which I have discussed, but believe me, REST APIs are always working behind the scene to make sure everything runs seamlessly. Now that we have seen how REST APIs are used in different industries, let's dive deeper into the four main methods that REST APIs use to communicate with the server. So there are four key methods that REST APIs use to handle data. These are get, post, put, and delete. Let's start with get. The get method is used when you want to retrieve the data from the server. For instance, when you open your weather app or check the forecast, you are making a get request to the server. The server processes this request and sends back the normal weather for your location. Next, we have post. This method is used when you want to send new data to the server. A common example is uploading a profile picture or posting a new status on social media. When you do this, your app sends a post request along with the data like an image or a text to the server, which stores this information. Then there is put. This method is used when you want to update existing data on the server. For example, if you want to change your display name on Instagram, you are making a put request with the updated information. The server receives this data and updates your profile and sends back a confirmation. Lastly, we have delete. As the name suggests, this method is used to remove data from the server. If you want to delete an old post you no longer need, you send a delete request to the server, which removes the data from its database. So each method that we discuss right now serves a specific purpose in managing the flow of data between the client and the server. These four methods are the building blocks of REST APIs. Now that you have understood these methods, let's familiarize yourselves with some of the key terms that we use related to REST API that often comes up while working with them. Now that you have understood these methods, let's look at some of the most important key REST API terminologies that we often use in our industry, and these terms and concepts come up often when we are working with REST APIs. Understanding these terms is crucial as they form the foundation of how REST APIs function and communicate with the server. Let's break down the most important term, namely endpoint, resource, request, and response. So first, let's talk about the endpoint. So an endpoint is essentially the URL where the API can be accessed. Think of it like an address where your request is sent. Every time you interact with an API, you are communicating with an endpoint. For example, if you are using a weather app to get the current weather for your city, the endpoint might look like api.weather.com/current, then location is equal to, let's say, Khandala, Mumbai, Pune, Hyderabad, New York, or anything. This endpoint tells the server exactly where to look for the data that you need. In short, the endpoint is like a specific location on the internet where the API lives, and every resource has its own unique endpoint. Next, we have the resource. In REST APIs, a resource refers to the data that you are working with. This could be anything from a user profile, a social media post, or a weather data. In case of an e-commerce platform, a resource could be a product, listing, or an order. Every resource is identified by a unique URL, and each resource can be manipulated using the REST methods we covered earlier: get, post, put, and delete. The resource is essentially what the API interacts with, and it's always represented in a structured format like JSON or XML. Now let's move on to the request. A request is a message that the client, which could be your app or browser, sends to the server. It contains all the information that the server needs to understand what actions to perform on the resource. For example, in a GET request, the client asks the server to retrieve data. In a POST request, the client sends new data to the server, and the request also includes details like the endpoint, basically the URL, or any additional data that needs to process the request, such as parameters or headers. Finally, there is the response. After the server processes the request, it sends back a response containing the result of the action. The response typically includes the data request, a status code indicating whether the request was successful or if there was an error, and possibly some additional metadata. The response is usually formatted in JSON or XML, making it easy for both humans and machines to read. For example, if you are retrieving weather data, the response might include temperature, humidity, wind speed, all in a structured format. Now that we have covered these key terminologies, let's move on to a practical example of a GET request in action. Let's dive into an example of a GET request to see how it works in real life. Imagine you are planning a trip to New York or Mumbai or anything, any city, and you want to check the weather before you pack. So you open your weather app and search for the current weather in New York. What's happening behind the scene is that your app is sending a GET request to the server asking the weather data for that specific location. The URL for this request might something look like this that I shared even earlier. So api.weather.com/current location is equal to New York, and this URL is the endpoint where the request is sent. The server receives the request and processes it and fetches the relevant weather data. Now, depending upon whether the server has the weather data or not, it will create a response. So let's say the server does not have data for a specific location, let's say Khandala. So in that case, it will prepare an error response, and if it does have the data, let's say for Mumbai, then it will create a success response with all the data. So in success case, the response might look like this. The current weather is 72 degrees in Fahrenheit and sunny. Your app takes this data and displays it on your screen, showing you the weather forecast. Now that you have a clear understanding of GET request, let's move on to an example of a POST request, which is used to send data to a server. POST requests are used when you want to send new data to the server. A common example is when you want to upload a new profile picture on a social media platform like Instagram. And let's walk through this example. When you decide to update your profile picture, your app sends a POST request to a specific endpoints. Let's say something like api.socialmedia.com/profile/upload. Along with the request, your app sends the actual profile picture, which is uploaded in binary format. The server receives this request, processes the file, and then store it in its database. Once the upload is successful, the server sends back a response to your app with a message like, hey, the profile picture is updated successfully. So basically, POST requests are used for creating new entries in a server database. Anytime you upload a file, submit a form, or create a new entry like a tweet or a comment, a POST request is sent to the server. And now that we have covered how to send new data, let's look at how we can update existing data using a PUT request. Let's take an example where you want to change your display name on a social media platform like Instagram. Maybe you have grown tired of your old username and wants to update it to something new. Here is what happens behind the scene. Your app sends a PUT request to an endpoint like api.socialmedia.com/profile/update along with the new display name. The server receives this request and updates your profile with the new information. Once the update is complete, the server sends back the response to your app with a message like, hey, the display name has been updated successfully. Even in case of an error, let's say the update was not successful. So in that case, server will prepare an error response and it will send the error response back to you. So basically, PUT requests are particularly useful when you want to modify existing data without creating something new. For instance, you might use put request to update a blog post or change your account settings or edit a product listing in an e-commerce store. So now that we have seen how to retrieve data using get request and send new data using post and now update existing data using put, let's look at how to delete data from a server using a delete request. As the name suggests, delete requests are used to remove data from a server. Let's say you posted something on social media from a while back and now you want to delete it. Here is how it works behind the scene. Your app sends a delete request to the server and the endpoint might look like this. So let's say api.socialmedia.com/post/delete. So it will include the ID of the post that you want to remove. The server receives the request and then processes it. Now it will again check whether this is a valid request or not. So in case you want to delete your own post, that is allowed, but now if you want to delete my post, right, that is not possible, right? So these validations are done by the server, and based on that, or let's say one more case that the post that you want to delete does not exist, right? So in that case also failure will be there. Once the deletion is successful, the server sends back a response to your app saying something like, hey, the post has been deleted successfully. So the delete requests are simple and straightforward. They are used for removing data from a system, whether you are deleting a social media post, removing an item from e-commerce cart, or unpublishing a blog post. Delete request ensures that the data is permanently removed from the server. Now that we have covered the core ROST methods, get, post, put, and delete, these methods form the backbone of how data is transferred between the client and the server. Next, let's summarize everything that we have learned today. Right, let's take a moment to recap everything that we have learned today about REST APIs. We started by defining what a REST API is, a set of rules that allow different systems to communicate with each other over the internet. REST APIs are like the translator that makes sure that your requests are sent and received correctly between the app, basically the client, and the server. Next, we explored the 4 key REST methods used in REST APIs. Get, which is used to retrieve data from the server. For example, when you check the weather or refresh your social media feed, you are making GET request. Then we talked about post, which is used to send new data to server. This could be uploading a profile picture, submitting a form, or posting a new status update. After that, we discussed about put, which is used to update existing data. An example would be changing the profile information or editing a blog post. And finally, we discussed about delete, which is used to remove data from the server. For instance, deleting a social media post or removing an item from your cart. We also looked at real world example of each method in action, like checking the weather or how data moves between client and server in modern web application. So REST APIs are used everywhere in social media, e-commerce, streaming services, or more. Whether you are browsing Instagram, shopping on Amazon, or streaming movies on Netflix, REST APIs are working behind the scenes to make sure that data flows smoothly. Now that you have understand the basics of REST APIs, you are one step closer to becoming a backend engineer pro. I encourage you to try making your own API request and start experimenting with these methods. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I hope today's video helped you get a clear understanding of fundamental of REST APIs, including the 4 key REST methods. These are foundational concepts that will come up again and again in your backend development journey. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and it really helps our channel grow and reach more learners like you. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you stay updated with every new video that we post. Your support means the world to us, and it allows us to continue creating valuable content that helps you to succeed in your career. Also, don't forget to join the Prepped Telegram community. It's the best place to stay updated on latest job opportunities, internships, and many more things. We have got more videos coming very soon, especially on backend engineering. So stay tuned, and thanks again for watching, and I will see you in another video.